Here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, man, it's on there. Is it
All right, we're good, guys.
Okay. Is that good?
Yeah. Oh, no, it's still showing you now.
Just flip
Flip it again. Just flip it once. You're good.
It might be a little delayed.
Okay. Yep, we're good.
Okay, awesome. Hey guys, welcome. My name is Mike Kerrigan, coming to you guys live at the Wealth Dynamics headquarters here in Anchorage, Alaska. If you guys are tuning in live or you're gonna come in later this evening, just a reminder, every video that we do every Friday night is uploaded on our YouTube channel. It gives you a little bit more accessibility, give you the ability to go back to certain segments of our training that we teach about how to actually create wealth. Our topic for tonight is a continuation. It's part 2 on the different ways to invest. Okay? This isn't about what's the right way, what's the wrong way, versus X, Y, and Z. We're going to talk about the different ways that you can invest. We're going to talk about what happens when you invest in certain type of assets, whether it's a income producing asset or you're investing for appreciation versus your traditional, not traditional and non-traditional ways of investing. So we're going to cover all of that tonight. And if you guys are here live with us, thank you for being with us here in Anchorage. We have our guests. Once again, this is really come down to, this is our staff training. So we do this for ourselves first. We want our employees, ourselves, to be the best versions of ourselves. So we want to be training constantly. We don't want to come out here every Friday, kind of give the idea that, we're not continually learning. That's why we're here tonight. That's why I'm here. We're here to learn how to be better financially literate and be able to help you guys get to achieve your goals as well. All right. So we're not doing any video tonight, but we're going to be talking, like I said, part 2, different ways to invest. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to just get going.
All right.
So here comes
Mike
Jerry.
a round of applause. Thank you, Mike. All right. Thank you. So, guys, we're on our second week of different ways to invest. If you guys are watching tonight for the first time, my name is Jerry. I'm the owner here at Wealth Dynamics. And so every Friday, we do a live course on wealth creation. We stream it on Facebook. We stream it on Instagram. We put it on YouTube. We really put it everywhere, really. And the purpose of that is to give you free content to help you really start to understand how does wealth creation happen. Okay. So like Mike said, one of the primary reasons we do this is to actually train ourselves first. So we're trying to train our staff, get our people leveled up on money. Secondarily, we're also looking for people that are already clients of ours that are trying to retain, grow, and build with more information. Okay. So you're going to see a lot of our clients logged in, a lot of our clients watching, sharing, commenting. And then thirdly, we are looking for clients. So if you want to become a client of ours tonight, throughout this, we're going to ask you, if you've seen that information, you can go to our site, sacredaccount.com. And I'm going to go ahead and put that up on the board later, but it's pretty simple, sacredaccount.com. And we're going to go ahead and get started. So really what we're going to talk about tonight are 2 different topics. Real quick review. Last week, we talked about mutual funds and we talked about annuities, right? So we talked really like retail financial products, which is a lot of the stuff that I used to sell. So I used to sell mutual funds and annuities, and I was really good at it. And so that's where we kind of dove into last week. And that really is where I would say most people invest. Most people invest in mutual funds and annuities. Tonight, we're talking about 2 other places, and they're places that I'm a little more passionate about tonight, places we direct more of our clients to now, okay? So the first slide here, Lexi, if you want to click through those. So the first slide, we're going to talk about private lending, and we're going to talk about real estate, okay? Now, as we're going through this, I want to talk to you about the real estate first. And with real estate, basically, you have 2 different ways to invest. You can invest in an equity position, or you can invest in a debt position, okay? So you can do equity or debt, and that really is what we're going to break down tonight. The main focus of either one of those should be income. So whether you're investing for equity, whether you're investing for debt, you should be investing for cash flow, okay? Our rule is, number 1, you need to understand it. Number 2, you need to not lose money. Number 3 needs to cash flow. Okay, those are the 3 chief rules of investing. So equity, we're going to dive into. Debt, we're going to dive into. There's pros to both. There's cons to both. But in my opinion, they're both better than the stock market. Okay, so I think they're both better than the stock market. I think they're both better than mutual funds, annuities, variable insurance products, etc. And so we're really going to dive into that. Now, Andrew Carnegie is quoted with saying that, more wealth has been created through real estate than any other asset class on earth. So if a guy like Carnegie, at one point, the richest man in the world, says that real estate is the way to go, we might want to take a look at that statement. All right. So the main focus is income. Next slide. Now, really quickly, I do want to review our investing rules. Okay. So we went over these last week. The number one rule of investing is never invest in something you don't understand. Never invest in something you don't understand. Now, I would challenge you that if you have a 401k, no matter how much you think you understand it, you really don't. Okay, do you guys remember last week we went over like the diversification and we used the window pane example? So what are the chances that we have all those window panes that someone actually understands every single one of those if they represent companies? Nobody studies the books of 6 dozen different companies in their mutual fund portfolio. So you can't say you understand it. And I would even go to say that the fund managers don't even understand it. Okay, so never invest in something you don't understand. And with that rule, guys, there's no problem with not investing yet. So if you don't understand something, it's okay to wait. It's okay to learn. It's okay to invest in yourself first till you actually do get an understanding of the assets you're looking at. Rule number 2, never lose money. Never lose money. Okay, I sent out a infographic today that showed 2 different investors. Investor A, they both earned a 10% return. Okay, Investor A, they earned 10% because they had 50% one year, negative 50% the next. 50% the third year, negative 50% the fourth year, 50% the fifth year. And if you cancel those out, that leaves a surplus of 50%. And if you divide 50% over the 5 years, that's a 10% return. But because they lost money, they actually had 10% return, but they had less money than they started with by about 80 grand. So that's where you really want to look at never lose money. Right? Investor B on that scale, they earn 10% every single year without losing. And you can see they made over $300,000 in profit in that example. Okay. So never lose money. And this actually comes from Warren Buffett. Okay. Warren Buffett's number 1 rule of investing is don't lose money. His number 2 rule of investing is never forget rule number 1. Okay. So this is the oracle, like telling us don't lose money. All right. Now, number 3 is cash flow is king. So when you invest for cash flow. With investing, again, it's clothing your capital. So invest for cash flow. If it doesn't cash flow, I wouldn't consider it a good investment. Number 4, you actually want security. So you want it to be backed by a real asset. If it's not backed by a real asset, then what's going to happen is in a worst case scenario, there's no downside protection. So if you make an investment and you can secure it with real estate, you can secure it with land, you can secure it with a contract, you can secure it with something tangible, then that's going to actually give you some downside protection. Did you know, we covered this last week, in the stock market, common shareholders, when a company liquidates, you are the last one to get paid. Everybody else gets paid first. You're the very last person to receive any money. There's no security there. Even bondholders, they owe you, yeah, but there's no security. If they can't pay you, like, it's not like you get to go take their office furniture. So you have to really look at, that's why we like real estate. It's secure. Okay, you can secure it with land. You can secure it with a contract, a deed. There's all sorts of things to do there. Number 4 is tax benefits. Okay, so you want to look for tax benefits. The reason why you want to look for tax benefits is we're going for sure things. Okay, was it, Mike, who was it? Ben Franklin that said death and taxes?
The 2 promises in life,
yeah.
guarantees in life.
Was that Ben Frankie?
I think it was Frank.
Benny Frank? Yeah. So he said that the 2 promises are guarantees in life, death and taxes, right? So if we know we're going to pay taxes, reduction of taxes is actually one of the most stable rates of return we can get. It's reliable. If we know there will be taxes and we know we can reduce those taxes, that's a reliable rate of return. Okay. Notice appreciation is last. The reason why appreciation is last is we don't know if it's going to happen. It's speculation. Okay. So if we're cash flowing, we know we can cash flow. That's not speculative. Okay. If we have assets securing the property, we know we have a security position. That's not speculative. If we can reduce our taxes, we know we can reduce our taxes. That's not speculative either. Appreciation is the only thing that is speculative. You hope it goes up. Who's ever had something where you thought it was going to go up in value, whether it was a stock, a cryptocurrency, a sports card, a vehicle? I've had baseball or basketball cards when I was a kid. I was like, yep, this thing's going to be worth $1 million one day. I could justify spending the money because I was hoping it would go up. Speculation is addicting. Speculation is what happens in Vegas. They understand the chemicals in your brain enjoy that rush. And so when you invest that way, you're going to have the same experience. Okay, you're always going to feel like you're going all in on a deal and then it's going to pay off. But the reality is you don't actually make anything unless you sell and get away with a profit. Until then, there's no actual gain. Okay, so those are the investing rules. Now, the next slide we're going to hit here is about real estate from an equity standpoint. Okay, so you can get into real estate as an equity owner. That's one of the main ways people get into it. And I kind of want to bypass the residential conversation tonight. So we're not going to talk about duplexes, fourplexes, single family homes. In my opinion, those are not great uses of capital. So, we're talking about when you're investing in real estate, commercial real estate. Okay, multifamily, we're talking about office, we're talking about retail, we're talking about large scale deals that decrease your vacancy risk by adding more units. All right, so you can do this by purchasing the property straight up as an owner. Okay, now the thing you want to realize is when you're investing this way, it's not the same as you're used to. You're used to maybe investing on a monthly basis, matching your 401k, putting money in your mutual fund. Investing in real estate as an owner doesn't work that way. You have to have a chunk of money to get into a deal. It's called your down payment. So if it's most commercial properties, and we actually are lucky to have a mortgage lender in the house. Jeremy, if I'm gonna do an investment property, how much do I usually need to bring to the table? 25%. 25%. So think about that. If you're gonna do $1 million deal, you need $250,000 in cash to do that deal. Okay, now the good news is if you do it right, you should make about $2,500 a month in cash flow. If you do it right? So you have to have that cash. So a lot of people don't do real estate for two reasons. They don't earn enough income to save enough money to get the 25% down or the 250. Okay, that's where we teach the 40% rule. Or they have the income, but they don't have the discipline. They can't save 40% of their income. Everything interrupts them. Vacations come up, new furniture comes up, house remodels come up, emergencies come up, and travel and all this other stuff. And so they might make $200,000, $300,000 a year, but they're still broke. Okay, and I sit down with that person all the time, and it still shocks me. How can you make $250,000 a year and have nothing in the bank? And that comes down to discipline. And really, like, you have to tie back why you're investing. Okay, Nano and I have this conversation all the time. What's the product? Why are you doing what you're doing? It's not just to own a property. What are you going to do with the money? And if the money is worth it, then you're going to be like, all right, I'm going to trade the money for freedom or whatever your motivator would be. That'll give you the discipline to save the $250 that you need for that deal. But if you're just doing it to say, hey, I'm an investor, that doesn't mean crap. Yeah, I know tons of investors that don't cash flow, that don't have a good portfolio put together, but they can call themselves an investor. So you want to really strategize and look at, all right, if I'm purchasing as an owner, am I putting a healthy down payment down? Now, on this note, down payment is literally purchasing cash flow. Okay, not many people like think of it that way, but they spin it. You want as little money down as possible. You don't want any equity in the deal. The more you have in debt, your debt, it's called your debt coverage ratio, goes down. Banks aren't going to love that, right? The other thing that's going to happen is you're not going to see as much cash flow because you have a bigger mortgage bill to pay. So when you do a 25% down payment, you're purchasing equity or you're purchasing cash flow. That equity eliminates what would be debt. It leaves more margin for you, and you actually get cash flow on that money. Okay, and you get the tax advantages, and you get the security, and you get all the nice things that you get with property, and you also do get the appreciation on the back end as well. Okay, so that's buying a property as an owner. And again, you do need to have a chunk of money, and I wouldn't just go into apathy on it because you're like, how do I get 250K? Ultimately, like, where there's a will, there's a way. Creativity is going to come from a commitment to making that goal happen. Okay, so the next thing here is when you're investing with equity, you can invest as a limited partner. You can invest as a limited partner. This would be like a Cardone capital. This could be, any sort of fund that's put together that you can invest in a partnership. And as a limited partner, you can get the interest in the deal. You can get the tax benefits of the deal. You can get the appreciation, but you don't have control of the deal. Okay, now the trade-off is you don't have to have 250K usually. So there's deals you can do as a limited partner where you might only need 5K or 10K or 15K because it's a pool of money, and usually the guy in charge brought most of it to the table. So your limited partner, meaning the barrier to entry to get into real estate just got lower for you. The trade-off is you don't have a say in how those properties get managed. So you have to really look at, all right, am I in this kind of like the entrepreneur thing, right? Am I really in this for control, or am I in this to just maybe get the outcome? And I don't care so much about the control. And if I'm not worried about control, I'll let them run it and I'll just collect the income and I'll go do another one. Okay, so that's where you look at like, you know, maybe me versus like a Jared Grant. I've got control. I can do what I want. Jared works for Grant. Jared probably doesn't have control over everything, but because Jared works in the right place, he does really well. The deal can be the same way. Okay, so you can run your own deal and you can be master of your deal, but if you don't know how to run the deal well, you might not cash flow as well as if you just ride on someone's coattails that really does know what they're doing, and it saves you that time and effort. Okay, so that's one of the second ways. The third way, and I put kind of next to this, is syndication. Okay, so syndication would mean that you raise funds, you raise money for the deal. Technically, you can buy the property and it's an equity position. The reason I put kind of is at some point you do owe that money back to the investors. So it's not full on like I bought property. It's more like I borrowed money from other people. It wasn't the bank necessarily, or maybe the bank was part of it and the down payment was from investors. But you know, basically I syndicated, I raised those funds and I do owe them back. And I'm typically going to pay a higher premium to use that money. So like one of the things that's coming up a lot is syndicating. You guys probably see it on Facebook all the time, right? Real estate syndicators. All right, so if you're syndicating, I want to make sure you understand, if you have never done option one or option number two before, do not syndicate. Okay, if you have never put money in real estate before, do not try and sell other people and putting money into real estate with you. That is a terrible idea. That's like flying an airplane with a bunch of passengers when it's your first time. Not a great plan. Okay, so there is something to be said for learning how to do this. So basically on the equity side, and I want to define equity real quick. So equity, the definition here of equity, the monetary value of a property or business beyond any amounts owed on it in mortgages, claims, and liens. Okay, so equity, like you do own it to the degree that the debt would be fulfilled in a worst case scenario if you had to sell or if it went under. Right, and a lot of times when you're doing commercial deals like this, Jeremy, typically banks are going to do a non-recourse loan on a big commercial deal. So what that means is the deal pays for itself. So if I do a non-recourse loan and Jeremy is my lender, that means that if I default on the mortgage, they're not really coming after my personal finances or personal credit. They're just going to take the deal away from me. They're probably not going to want to give me money again, but the deal does have enough equity and enough cash flow where the bank considers it a viable asset. And they're like, all right, it wouldn't be, you know, terrible if Jerry defaulted. We can get the asset back. We'll still make out financially. And I'll probably just be done with the deal. Okay, so that's one of the benefits, and it's kind of ironic, and maybe Jeremy can add a couple 2 cents here. It's kind of ironic once you get like the down payment and a few of the qualifications out of the way. From like a technical standpoint, it often can be easier to qualify for commercial money than residential money.
Yep.
Okay, why are some of those reasons?
Well, the biggest one's the debt to income ratio. So with commercial lending, with commercial residential, either way, they are, as you already mentioned, actually using the property's income versus yours.
Yeah.
Whereas you're buying a fourplex or triplex or even a home, they're counting your cars, your credit cards, and the debt of the building itself. So
yeah,
the DTI is much higher on a residential than it is commercial.
So basically, like it's a different entity, is what Jeremy's saying. They count the balance sheet and the cash flow statement of the deal, and my personal finances aren't really included. So if I'm including them and I've got a mortgage and I've got a car payment and I've got credit card loans and I've got all this stuff that I have to pay for, that's going to offset the amount of free cash flow that I have to actually show the bank I can afford the deal. So that's a big factor to consider. And a lot of people, especially here in Anchorage, get stuck here because they try and jump into the residential thing and they're like, well, I'm just going to keep getting fourplexes. You're going to max out on that, especially if you're trying to do it through subsidized loan programs where you're only doing 3 and 5 and 0 down. You're going to get maxed out on that. And eventually all of your money will be tied up in deals that aren't cash flowing. And your only hope is let them appreciate and then 1031 exchange to a bigger one. Yeah. Repeat the cycle. Repeating the cycle. And the entire time you're not earning cash flow. That's the thing, is you're not earning cash flow. And if you are earning cash flow, it's because you're self-managing. And that's Jeremy knows that's not a fun thing to have to do. Okay, so self-managing, like you want to avoid that. That's not passive. That's going to be a lot of work that goes into it. So those are things you want to consider when you're investing for equity. Okay, and it's not going to be, we're going to hit the debt next. It's not going to be one is good, one is bad. It's different outcomes, right? So like if I was, let's say that my business, I run a company. So let's say my business is really stable and I'm not super involved in it anymore day to day, and I can start to put my time and attention somewhere else. Equity investing might make a ton of sense for me. Okay, especially one where I'm more involved, because if I'm more involved, I can choose the deals, I could potentially make more money. But where that's probably not a good idea would be just for perfect example where I'm at in my business now. We're climbing up. I'm very involved. I do a lot of work every single day. I'm probably here 16 hours. So it wouldn't make sense for me to have these other properties that I've got to go pay attention to. Okay, especially if I only, let's say I only have 100 grand. If I put 100 grand down, that's an Anchorage Mountain View fourplex. What do you think my cash flow is on 100 down on a like $400,000 fourplex?
Or barely 1,000.
Maybe $1,000 a month. And that's probably me self-managing. Okay, so think about like shoveling snow, picking up dog crap, like fixing things, dealing with tenants, cleaning, like all of the stuff for $1,000 a month. I made $1,000 a month delivering pizza in high school, and it was easier than that.
I don't even make $1,000 a month, but I have a fourplex.
Yeah, so that's Mike, right? Mike met me like the day he was about to sign was when we met. It was terrible timing. And I didn't know what to be like, Mike, that's an idiotic idea. I was like, all right, let me feel this guy out. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna do another one. I got a VA. I was like, oh man. So that's the example, right? But you have to really understand, again, what phase are you in? What part of the cycle are you in? If you're on the upward climb where you're trying to increase your income, $1,000 a month really is not going to be that helpful to you. Especially if the trade-off is your attention and your time going into minuscule things. Okay, like the thing that I know I'm gonna just say this last part before we move on to the debt. The thing that most investors overlook when it comes to investing is return on time invested. Return on time invested, and that's the most important number. Return on time invested. I can make an hour of phone calls, or I can spend an hour collecting rents and running the books on a fourplex. Okay, Nano, you know, what's the potential on an hour worth of phone calls?
With the qualified people? Like a lot.
Yeah, thousands in an hour. So it's not even about passive or not passive. It's about like volume. Okay, because if you're not at the top already, the passive doesn't matter. You're gonna have to work anyways. Okay, $1,000 a month didn't make you wealthy. You still have to go to work tomorrow. You still have a job. So it comes down to, if I still have to work tomorrow, do I want the $1,000 a month, or do I want to just take that hour and just go make another 10 grand real quick? And that's going to be like, especially for you guys that are starting, that's going to be a constant tension. When do I get rid of my first money to do my first deal? Especially if you're a business owner or a salesperson or an entrepreneur, and you could drop that 10 grand on personal development, Wealth DynamX University, going to a course, doing something that you get that nugget and it helps you make another 6 figures. Okay, so make sure with the equity, like you've got your head on straight. You're not investing because of laziness. You don't invest because of laziness. You invest because of future laziness. You know, in 20 years you can be lazy. Right now, though, just because you put 10 grand into a deal or 50 grand into a deal doesn't mean you're wealthy. You're still going to have to do the same stuff you did today. There's just an extra $500 now, or an extra $1,000 now. Okay, so that's really the equity side. The next one is the debt position. Okay, right now, and I'm going to go ahead and disclose this right now. For me, the debt position is my favorite. That's the one I do with all of my money. It's my favorite. It's the one I recommend the most, and I'm going to go through why. And again, it's not a right or a wrong answer. It just tells you a lot about where I'm at in my investing cycle. Okay, so debt position, lending money to an investor. Lending money to an investor. That would be an example of a debt position. So I want to buy a deal, and I went to Jeremy, the bank, and Jeremy says, Jerry, for whatever reason, you can't qualify for a deal. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, maybe Nano has money and Nano could be my bank. Nano might have 100 grand set aside that he's just been chilling with, waiting for the right opportunity. And I come to Nano and I say, hey, I'm going to go buy this Mountain View fourplex. It's nasty. It's terrible. There's syringes in the backyard, but I'm going to make $1,000 a month. And Nano's like, I'll give you the 100K. It's going to be like Guido in a back alley, though. I know the bank just told you no. I'm going to charge you exorbitant interest, but at least you'll have the deal. And if you don't pay me back, I'm going to take your deal away, syringes and all. But you can have my 100 grand. And I don't want to be involved at all. You pay me every month. If you do not pay me, I take your thing away. Deal? We shake on it. I now borrow Nano's money. I pay Nano, 6, 8, 10, whatever the number would be on my percentage. And then I go buy my deal with it. Okay. Nano is the investor here. Nano is a lender. Nano has no involvement in the deal whatsoever. Nano is the bank. Like, think about how many times have you heard of someone going to the bank with a deal and the bank was like, oh, dude, no, I want 50% of that. I want to get in on the equity side. The bank don't want to touch it. They're just like, here's the money. Pay us every month. We don't want to see you, hear from you. Just pay us. I don't want to be involved. I don't want to hear about the toilet broke. I don't want to hear any of that stuff. Just make sure you pay us every month. And if you don't, I'm going to take the thing away. That's how banks work. Banks lend money like that. So they don't want to be involved in the deal. They understand their business is banking. They make more money being a bank than they do being a real estate owner. So that's got to be the mindset, right? So that's lending money to an investor. You can do that on hard money. You can do that on a term loan. You can do that on a balloon loan. Like, there's so many ways to go about doing that. But again, and I don't want you to get diluted here. It's not about appreciation. You're not going to borrow money to hope that the deal goes up so that you can sell it later and pay off your loan. Okay, borrowing money for investing in real estate is about spreads. Okay, in debt, it's a spread. It's an interest rate. Okay, I'm borrowing at 8, I'm earning 10. I make a 2% spread. Now, how many times can I scale that? Okay, and don't let the spread thing confuse you. Really, that's just cash flow. It was no different than the equity deal. My income was this, my expenses were that. I kept the difference. My earning rate is this, my borrowing rate is that. I keep the spread in the middle. Okay, so you're thinking about spreads, right? So, and you can get really, really creative with this. I know a guy that he'll do the deal. So he'll borrow the money from Nano. He'll buy the deal. He'll pay Nano 8%. He'll buy the deal. He'll get the income from the deal. And then he'll owner finance that out to somebody else at 10%. So he used Nano's money because he doesn't want to own the ugly deal. He used Nano's money to buy the deal, to then lend the deal to somebody else at 10%. And he keeps the difference in the middle. Now get this. He doesn't want just a spread, so he sells the difference in the middle to somebody else and gets advanced on the cash. None of it was his money.
Yep.
Okay, so that's a way you can do it. Now you have to realize too that could fall apart. Billy stops paying. Now I don't have the money for my spreads anymore. I sold the spread. I don't have the cash flow because I got that money up front. I still have to pay Nano, and I'm not getting income from the deal anymore. So I've got to be really good at evicting Billy and finding a new Billy really fast. Because I owe that cash flow, right? So if, let's say my spread was $200, well, I sold the $200 a month because it's a 30-year payment term. I sold that stream to Jeremy. Jeremy gave me like 100 grand or whatever it was. So I've got 100K, cool. But this guy stopped paying. I still have to make payments of $200 a month to Jeremy for that spread that I sold. And I've still got to make payments back to Nano to pay him on the original loan on the 100. So I've got to be really good at keeping occupancy. Okay, so that's a really complex way to do it. I don't like doing it that way. That's too many things to think about. I like just saying, hey, Nano, I'll lend you this money. You pay me 30% interest. Probably not that high. You pay me 10% interest, and I don't want to touch the deal. That's fine. I'm good with it. I don't need to own it. I don't need to run it. I don't need to do anything but get paid every month. I'm going to go run my business. Okay, and right now we probably bring in about $3,000 a month like that, where it's not, I don't ever see it. It just goes right to my sacred account, goes right back out. As soon as we have enough again, we're going to put into another one, and we just keep doing that. Okay, and that's because I'm running a business. My business is not $3,000 a month in spreads. Okay, I'm looking for a few more zeros if we're being frank. And I can't do that on spreads. I got to do that through increasing my income right now till I've got enough to buy enough of those spreads to say, all right, now it's 30,000 a month or 300,000 a month or 3 million a month, right? So that's the spread thing. You can also do owner financing. Okay, owner financing is, I don't necessarily maybe have money, but I have an asset. Okay, so some people will do this with their homes. They bought a home, they went to Jeremy, they got qualified, they bought the home, they're paying Jeremy 3% on the home, you know, and they have the house, but they decided they don't want it. or they, what's it called, PCSing. They PCS, they're military, they go out of state. And basically they're like, all right, well, I don't want to sell the home. Maybe I'm upside down on it. So instead, I'm going to find Nano who wants the home, and I'm going to give him a private mortgage. Nano's going to make payments to me on the home, rent to own basically. You're going to make payments to me on the home. When you finally pay me all my payments, the home is yours. So I didn't ever have any money. I just had the asset. Mike's thinking about his fourplex right now. He's like, I found the way out. I just got to find an idiot that'll buy it. So that's what you can do, is you can owner finance the asset if you don't have the money, right? So that's something you can do. And if you think about, guys, a lot of times, like if you look in the economy around us, like banks do this, car dealerships do this. Like most car dealerships, they don't actually own any of their inventory. They borrowed all of their inventory on short-term loans, and they're hoping they can sell it for a profit, and then they can finance it. Even the owner financing on inventory, they don't keep the owner financing. They might, but usually they're going to sell it to a bank for an advance. So a lot of companies do it this way, but it's when they're trying to turn an asset that they really don't want. Okay, a car dealership doesn't want to keep the car. They want to move the car. So in this case, it would be, this is an asset that I don't want. So I'm going to get rid of this thing by owner financing it to somebody else. Because if I wanted it, then I would keep it because it was cash flowing. So you'll see owner financing happen a lot with single family. Sometimes in Anchorage, you'll see it here with fourplexes where people maxed out on their VA and their FHA. And what's that 5% one called? That one, conventional. Yeah, they maxed it on their conventional 5%. And so they're thinking about, well, how can I get another asset? And they'll find Nano who has the nasty fourplex, and they'll owner finance it from him. And Nano didn't want the asset. He's like, dude, there was a shootout in the basement. I ain't saying nothing about it to Jerry because it's owner finance and everything's under the table. Okay, so that's really what you want to look at. And then again, I wrote syndication on the bottom of this too, because again, syndication is a form of debt. So again, you can equity syndicate, you can debt syndicate. Either way, you owe the money back to the investor, and you're going to pay them something to use that money until it's due back.
Is a REIT kind of like a
That's a good question.
syndicate of debt?
That's a good question. So a REIT is not actually real estate. It's basically a mutual fund that's investing in real estate, and you own shares of the fund, but you don't have any of the benefits of the real estate.
Kind of a debt, but not really.
It's kind of a debt, but not really. So literally, like a REIT is a mutual fund, and the mutual fund just happens to invest in real estate, but you don't get any guarantees. If they default on you, you don't get the asset. It's the same as the stock market is.
Like a timeshare you can't visit.
Yeah, and they pay you every month if it does well. Okay, so it's a retail financial product. That's a really good question to bring up. And oftentimes REITs are what's called closed-ended, and they're also privately traded. So if you buy a REIT that's closed-ended and privately traded, what that means is I cannot sell it on the secondary market. I can't get rid of it. Once I bought it, it's mine forever until they decide to go public, and I can move that over to Nano now. Okay, so I've met with guys that are, I met a guy, his name was James, it was like 4 years ago, 76 years old, bought a REIT, and the thing was tanking, and it was still closed-ended, public or privately traded, and he just had to sit there and hold on to it. Because it's literally the SEC makes it illegal for him to sell that to somebody else, and the company is not going to buy it back from him. Why would they buy their own stock back? It's not doing well. So you want to stay away from REITs. It's not real estate. Okay, it's kind of like what is it? Like that smoothie you made last night? It wasn't a real milkshake.
It was real.
It was not a real
just
milkshake.
strawberry and milk.
It was only strawberries and milk. Mike, is that a milkshake?
No.
Where's the ice cream? Right?
Yeah.
It's literally that strawberry milkshake. Milk and strawberry got shaken up.
None of the boys came to the yard. So a debt, I want to define a debt really quick. So a debt is a liability or obligation to pay or render something that is owed or that one is bound to pay or perform for another. So remember with debts, and this is why it's really good on the investing side, and it can be kind of harsh if you're on the the borrowing side. The reason I like debts is because no matter what, I get something. Okay, I'm either going to get paid my interest, or I'm going to take away the asset. And really the debt is just paper. So it's really all about the contract. So if you're debt investing, it's not just a handshake with a buddy. Hey, I promise to pay. Like you have a freaking locked down contract. If you default, I get your firstborn child in your toe. Like you got it locked in there, right? So it's in the contract. And the nice thing is it's totally hands off. I don't visit any of the properties I'm a lender on. I don't need to. As long as my check shows up, I know they're good. Okay, so those are things you want to consider. The downside is if you're borrowing the debt, again, you do have to pay it. Unless it's non-recourse, then they'll take the asset away, but ultimately, like you still had to pay it. They took away your thing. You're no longer in. Okay, and that does become a reputation. You're not going to have banks continue to lend to you if they're like, oh yeah, he just walks away from the deal every time. And we've had to pull it away from him, every single time that's happened. So like when you look at debt, like realize as an investor, debt's really good. As a borrower, debt can also be really good, but if you don't know what you're doing, it can slaughter you. So you want to be super aware of that. And it's all about interest rates. You want to understand those. You want to understand how interest rates work. A lot of times it could be linked to like prime rates. So you want to understand treasuries and some of those different factors that play in there as well. So those are all things like if you're doing the debt investing, you don't need to understand a financial statement as much as you kind of do, but you don't need to understand as much as you need to understand rates and contracts. Okay. Now, whether you're doing debt or equity, here's my rules. If I'm doing a debt deal or an equity deal, I need 3 years of financial statements. I need 3 years of income. If the investor cannot show me, or the borrower cannot show me 3 years of income statements, 0% chance they're going to get my money. And if they do, it's because I know that I can really make a ton of interest. They're like, hey, I don't have any of that stuff. Great. I'm going to have you pay 29.99%, and you're probably going to secure me on more than the thing is worth. You borrowed 50, you're going to secure me on 100. So those are like, if I'm doing that, and that's like, I've never actually done that because I always follow my rule. But if I were to, I would be looking at, in a default situation, I want twice my money back. And if they keep paying, it's going to be ridiculously high interest because it's basically unproven. There's a high chance something could go wrong, right? So those are things you want to consider. Now, on the financial statements, you need to be looking at, your gross income, your operating expenses. You need to be looking for like concerning numbers. So if you see like everything is stable, and all of a sudden there was this giant repair bill, like you want to ask about it. What did you guys fix? What did that go to? Or like, let's say all of a sudden there's a security cost that showed up on the balance sheet and you're thinking about buying the place. Now all of a sudden you want to be thinking about, all right, well, you guys just started paying triple the cost in security. Like what's going on? You hire patrol, like is there violence in the area? Like those are all things you can look at and learn about through the numbers. Okay, and you should visit the properties too. And basically like, you want to see the area for yourself. For me, I personally don't want to invest somewhere where I wouldn't feel comfortable living. So I want a nice area. I want it to be clean. I want it to be safe. We've even done, we've helped with mobile home parks before. And even the parks we've invested in, like, yes, it's a mobile home park, but you go in and they're freaking spick and span. Very nice mobile homes. It's not some rundown trailer park that smells like urine and it's going to burn down in a couple months. Okay. So you also want to know, like, I own a quality product or I'm investing in a quality product, because if those are driven by rent in a down market, if you've got a quality product, you've got leverage. Okay, so if rents are dropping and you're competing, you can say, hey, my rent's competitive and I've got a better place for you to stay. Versus someone that's like, yeah, the rent's cheap, but it's a slump. So those are all things you want to understand. So the next page here is similarities, okay? So similarities between debt, similarities between equity. So cash flow and margin is still the top priority. Okay, whether it's an equity deal or a debt deal, cash flow and margin, one and the same. They're the same exact thing. They're the top priority. Okay. Number two, it's still backed by a real asset. So whether it's going to be an equity deal or a debt deal, there's still something securing it, which makes it safe and stable. Number three, it generates income. Okay. And especially in the debt, like the lending world, you'll see a lot of deals that are syndicated that are development deals. So they'll be like, hey, Nano, we'll pay you 10% interest for this loan and it's going to be backed by real estate. And you're like, dope, man. Let me see the numbers. And they're like, oh, well, we're building them. Nano's like, so really it's just land? Well, no. There's going to be duplexes and we're going to rent those out. We're going to sell those when we're done. Yeah, but right now it's just land. There's no income backing the deal. So you're hoping you can build it faster than you run out of money and keep my payments going. I don't want that deal. So you have to consider these things. And that's where like a lot of our clients that are watching, if you guys are watching, we actually do this for you. So if you've got a deal, call me up and say, Jerry, I've got a deal. And we'll look at all of this stuff for you. Like I'm like a freaking pessimist with numbers. So you can ask anybody about that. Like if you have a deal, show it to me. And we're going to look at 3 years of income, expenses. We're going to analyze all this stuff for you. Okay. And then again, like the final similarity here, equity and debt are both different ways of accomplishing the same thing. Okay, I'm still trying to get passive income. I'm still trying to understand what I'm doing, right? And the way, again, back to rule number 1, never invest in something you don't understand. If you can't draw it on a napkin, you don't understand it. If you can't draw it on a napkin, you don't understand it. So on a debt deal, I can draw, I'm going to loan money to this guy. He's going to buy this thing and he's going to pay me back. And if he doesn't, I'm going to take the thing away from him. That's super simple. On an equity deal, I'm going to buy the thing. I'm going to rent it out. I'm going to keep my expenses lower than my income, have someone else manage it, have cash flow, and I'm going to make money on it. But if you can't do that, like normal, like just simple drawing, it's probably not a good idea for you to invest in it. So ultimately, like it's a simple deal. You understand it. It's backed by an asset. It cash flows. It does all the things you need it to do. Okay. And then some of the differences, again, differences in the deals. If you're investing in real estate as an equity position versus a debt position, there's a difference in control. So as an equity position, I might have more control. I can actually run the deal. If I have a debt position, I literally have no control of the deal. As long as they pay me, I'm good. So if they're like, hey, we're going to renovate it and we're going to just knock out all the walls and paint it pink and put llamas in the backyard, like, yeah, that might not be great for tenants, but as long as they pay me, I kind of got to be okay with that. Right? The second thing is responsibility. Okay, control and responsibility. Responsibility meaning if I'm like, yeah, I do want to own it, guess what that means? That means I own it, which means if something happens, I'm the guy. Okay, so I don't want the responsibility. That's why I don't do a ton of equity deals. I'm irresponsible with that right now. I don't want that. My responsibility is somewhere else. So I don't want the responsibility. That's why I do a debt deal. The next one is downside protection. Okay, downside protection. On a debt deal, you have better downside protection. Okay, the reason being is you're gonna get paid your interest rate no matter what, and if they don't, like there's not really a gray area. You just take away the asset. Okay, on an equity deal, the difference though is growth potential. So think about, let's say Mike's doing a debt deal with me, and I'm gonna pay Mike 9% interest. What that means is Mike will always make 9%, right? But Mike, if I make 15%, how much do you make? Still 9. Okay, so somebody that's going to loan money or borrow at a rate, it means that they think they're going to make more than the rate. So as an investor, you need to be okay with that. All right, I'm not going to get the full percentage. They're going to go make more money with it, right? And I need to be happy with my number. So I need to understand what does my number need to be, right? Now, on an equity deal, okay, if Mike does an equity deal with me and I make 20% and I have Mike at an 80% split, Mike can make a big chunk of that 20%. Right? But Mike, if I make 0, what do you make?
0.
If I lose money, what do you have?
Nothing.
You lose money too. Okay. So that's really too, like I got to look at what do I want to have? Do I want to have a floor or do I want to have a ceiling? Okay. So if I'm going for the ceiling, I want to go really, really high, but I know that I could fall and lose money versus I want the floor. And so for me right now, again, I want the floor. I want to know I'm going to make 9 no matter what. I don't need to think about it. I don't want to go check. I don't want to do the bookkeeping. I don't want to worry about it. I want to stick it in the deal, make 9 and go run my business. Okay. Now midway through my career, it's probably going to switch. My business will be pumping and I'll be like, all right, now I can go focus and I can try and make more than 9. Right. And then the other one is taxes. So on a debt deal, there's not as many tax advantages. Okay, earned interest is taxed the same as income. So if you're getting paid income or interest, it's going to be the same taxation as income. Now, what you can do is you can structure the note differently, right? So if you structure the note where it's a principal and interest amortization, you're only going to pay taxes on the income itself. Okay, I can structure it to where it's a balloon payment where I make only interest, I pay all the taxes on the front, or I could structure it to where it's principal payment first with interest on the back end, and I don't pay any taxes till the principal's paid back. And if it's a good enough deal, I could just keep refinancing and never get my interest. I can just say it's always been principal. Every time it's supposed to be interest, we refinance, and I give them the money back, and then they just keep spitting it back to me.
That's like the auto loan, right?
Just refinancing the auto loans.
I like with the balloon payment. So
Yeah, so it's almost like a reverse balloon payment.
Can you explain that again?
So the balloon payment would be interest only, and then you'll pay me my principal back at the end. And I'm going to get taxed on the front end of that deal, but I could flip that. So if I loan you 50 and you're going to pay me, 25 grand in interest over the course of 5 years, well, I could have it structured on the amortization where all of it was principal. And as soon as the principal payments were done, we refinanced to either a higher rate or a lower rate. What that did though is I gave the 50 back to you, never received any gains, and then you started paying me my principal again. It's the same money. We're just categorizing it as principal rather than interest on our taxes. So those are really the only differences in like lending deals. On debt deals, like that's going to be the way you go on taxes. Really, that's all you can do. It's not a ton of creativity or flexibility there. On equity deals, you do have tax advantages on write-offs, interest, operating expenses, appreciation. There's all sorts of things you can write off. And sometimes on an equity deal, if you've got the right deal, you can actually cash flow, but through your depreciation and expenses, you could show that you made no money. So you could earn tax-free income, basically saying, hey, we made all this money, but we spent it all on paper, even though there was still cash flow. Okay, and part of bookkeeping, this is with investing and business. There's the P&L, which is for taxes, and then there's the cash flow statement, which is for operations. Okay, I always show the tax person my P&L. All of my stuff is set up for tax deductions. I operate off my cash flow statement. I'm actually making sure I did make money, even though on my taxes it shows I didn't, because of the way it's categorized and classified. Okay, so those are all things you want to look at there. So those are differences. And then the biggest difference is involvement. Okay, so again, on a debt deal, you're not involved really at all. On an equity deal, you could be very involved to the point that you're spending a lot of your time at the property. Or it could just be I'm a limited partner and I look at the numbers in the books and I get my check every month. Okay, so those are all the things I wanted to hit tonight. I did want to open it up for questions, and then maybe we can draw some examples if you guys have anything. Nano, Mike, Jeremy, do you guys have any questions?
What would be this last part that you were explaining? I kind of got lost there. Why would somebody structure a deal in such a way that they'll refinance it right away?
On a debt or equity?
The debt deal you're talking about.
On the debt deal?
Yeah.
Yeah, so on the debt deal, and real quick, is this in the shot? Probably not. Huh? But now it is.
You're good on Ring Central.
Okay. So basically on this deal, Nano, so I'm gonna put money into a deal.
That's not very good, Jack, for the
Not very bright.
try either the red or the blue.
There we go.
Perfect.
So I'm gonna put some money into a deal. Let's say it's a real estate deal, and I'm charging them interest, and then they're paying that back to me. So I can structure it to where, let's say I loaned them 50K, and I'm charging them 10% interest. So when I loan them this 50K, and I'm charging them 10% interest, when they pay me back, if they pay me back interest first now, I'm taxed on that interest. Okay, because it's a gain, it's earned income.
Okay.
Because I made money. Now, if I told them, hey, I'm going to give you 50K at a 10% interest rate, and you're still going to pay me, that's $5,000 a year, right? You're still going to pay me $5,000 a year, but you're going to pay me $5,000 a year of principal, meaning you're going to give me my own money back. I still made $5 grand, but the $5 grand isn't taxable right now because it wasn't a gain. It was just my 50K back. Okay, now the benefit would be this. I would do that because maybe I didn't have a lot of tax breaks this year. So I had a high high tax bracket. And so because of that, I don't want the interest to show up because it's just going to make it worse. So I'm going to say, hey, I just want the principal. Now the trade-off is this guy, when he gives me the principal, he doesn't get to write that off as an expense. because he's just giving me my money back. There's no interest cost to him. So I'm getting the tax benefit, but the borrower is not. That might affect my rate. The borrower might say, hey, I'm not willing to pay you 10 if I'm not going to get a tax break for paying the interest. I'll pay you 8. I'll pay you 9. They'll figure out what that number is, and you guys might negotiate. But let's say I have a really low bracket. Okay, so I have a really low tax bracket, maybe have a ton of expenses and depreciation, then I might be okay with that interest coming to me because I'm going to write it all off anyways. So I've got ways to offset the interest, and the trade-off could be like if I have the interest coming to me directly up front, you know, I could charge a higher rate. Yeah, I'm charging you a higher rate. You're going to deduct it anyways. What's another 2 points? You're going to write it off on your taxes anyways. Pay me the interest up front. Okay, or I could do an AM deal where it's principal and interest.
That's the P&I.
P&I, yeah. And you could do like, there's so many ways to structure this. You can do 30-year, right? So there's your like traditional mortgages. You do 30-year, 15-year, you can do 10-year. What a lot of investors will do is they'll do a 30-year amortization with a 10-year call.
What does that
Meaning
mean?
the payments are based on the 30-year loan, but at 10 years, they're going to pay me off early. And what that does is it lessens, like on an interest-only deal, the risk for the borrower is they've got to pay that 50K back. And so if they don't have 50K, they can be in trouble. So if they do a P&I deal like this, where it's 30 years on a term and they're going to pay back in 10 years, well, this was P&I, so it lowered the 50K. They're paying some principal back. So that balloon is a little softer and they're not hit with 50K. It's maybe only 38K by the time the 10 years is done because they've been slowly paying off a little bit of that principal amount. Does that make sense?
Somewhat. So I still don't get why. So the individual, you know, let's say on the 50K example, they would get the 50K back within a 10-year time frame.
Yeah.
The
So
lender would.
So the lender would loan out that 50. Are you asking if they're getting principal first?
No, like, because you're saying I'm getting a little confused when you're saying they're getting interest plus the money back with the whole terminology there.
Okay. So when you get the loan out there, they'll pay 10% interest. So if they're paying 10% interest only, they're going to basically pay 5K. They still owe me 50 though.
Sure.
So at the end of the 10 years, they'll pay me my final 5K and they have to pay me 50K back at the end of that 10-year term.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
And at that point, what is the tax advantage, if there's any, if I'm lending on a private deal? Are there any?
So if you're lending on a private deal, if you're doing interest only, you've got to be able to offset the expenses. So there's not like a deduction you're going to get because you did private lending. You're going to get income from it. And then you would just, in your ordinary tax world, figure out ways to lower that down.
Okay, in the 50K that I were to get it back, I would get taxed on it again, or no?
No, so that's original money. There's no gain. So you'd only be taxed on the interest.
And what were you saying about refinancing the deal as soon as it gets done on a 5-year term? What is
Yeah.
that?
So that's an interesting one. So basically, if you loan out the 50, let me clean up our board a little bit. So if you loan out the 50, so you're going to loan this out for the deal. And then you're going to say, all right, I'm going to have you pay me back principal only. Meaning for the first, however many payments, they're only basically giving you your money back, which means you didn't gain anything, which means you're not taxed, right? So they give you the 50K back. As soon as you receive the final principal payment, you would offer to refinance. Hey guys, I can refinance you. I can charge you, a quarter of a point lower on the rate. And then we refinance and we do another 5 years. Now you have my money back and you're going to keep paying me cash flow. And I don't pay any taxes because I never actually received interest yet.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. So at the end of the second deal, I would eventually get my money back.
Yeah. And you would
along with the cash flow.
Along with the cash flow, and you'd want to figure out what your ideal term was as an investor. Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Is it 7 years? Honestly, I try not to go past 10. Like 5 probably is on the minimum for a good rate. You're gonna have to go 5. If you go less than 5 on like a note, you're probably only gonna get paid like 5, 6, 7% because it's such a short term.
Sure.
And the borrower, they have a smaller window to go make money with your money. So if I give them 5 years or 10 years, I can get a better rate because they know, all right, I've got a decade before I've got to pay him back. So I can make a ton of money, and then I can make all my profits and pay him back at the end.
Okay.
Does that make more sense?
No, it
now?
does. No, it does.
Cool. Good questions. Good questions. Mike, do you have any questions?
I guess my thing would be, because I get it now with the taxes, right? So if you set up basically this is a debt position one compared to the equity, which is you have more money leveraged into it. So let's just say your basic debt position, you loan out money, $50,000. On the promissory note, you're going to tell the borrower they're going to have to pay you principal, no interest. If you're trying to show the IRS that you didn't make money, but you
Right.
really did. And this is all just based on how you categorize the money.
Mhm.
That's just based on tax planning, not tax evasion, because you know what you're trying to do for the year.
Yeah.
If
Like
you
if you got audited, you
Yeah.
would not be in trouble.
It's just like that's basically what I mean. Not basically what Jeff Bezos kind of does, but he kind of one of those tiers like how to show $1 billion profit and not have to pay taxes because of the different type of deductions he has and incentives.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's contributing. But I guess if you took all that and at the very end of that deal, like you said, refinance, you're just going to give them opportunity. What if they don't refinance at that point?
Then you get paid all your interest at once.
Okay, and
So
then you're
that's-
responsible for all of that.
All of the taxes at that point. So that's where you've got to really have a strategy. So it's not, and a lot of times people will just do interest only on a regular term because they don't want to figure out how do I plan for, $100,000 of extra earned income in 1 year that I've got to offset all of a sudden.
This would be good for a bunch of those Dave Ramsey plans. You don't like paying interest. They're like, yeah,
Just pay me the principal, man.
I can do it all day long.
So that's basically, yeah, like you have a big tax problem if you didn't have any sort of deductions or depreciation the year that all that interest finally did come back.
Yeah.
And you can also do P&I and keep refinancing too. Like you can do that anytime. Refinance, whether it's interest only, principal only, or principal and interest.
This is what Grant talked about tax deferred.
He does, so he doesn't do private lending. He basically refinances out of properties. So if I've got a big old equity position, I can go to Jeremy and say, hey, Jeremy, can I get, a cash out refi on this deal? And he'll refinance me out of my property by giving me further debt. And I can go use the money for my property to go buy another property, but I didn't ever actually gain anything. So I can either refi or I can just 1031 exchange it where I trade this property for that property. And none of it was ever taxable. Yeah. So you can basically move money without ever paying taxes on it. Got to know the game. Yep.
There would be no reason to ever get rid of that property because it's cash flow.
Yeah, if it cash flows, it makes sense. Unless it's stupid appreciation. Like, we don't bet on appreciation, but if it was stupid and you're like, man, this thing went up 10 million bucks for no reason, you would want to look at, if I keep the cash flow, how long will it take me to make $10 million in cash flow? Yeah. And if I don't want to wait that long, then I would sell it to get the money up front right now. Or I would go to Jeremy and say, hey, can you cash me out on a refi so I can use the 10 million, keep the cash flow, and go do another deal
Within the same property.
within the same property. Yeah.
And that's what Grant's doing.
That's what Grant's doing. And what Grant's doing is really genius. Basically, like he's getting all of the investors to fund Cardone Capital. The velocity that he's doing deals with, he probably would not get bank approval for all of those deals at the same time. So because he's using private investors, he can fund it through investor money at 4.5%, which technically right now is probably lower than he would pay on a loan to a bank. Okay, so he can get 4.5% and promise them the appreciation or the cash out. And then if rates ever drop, he's going to go to the bank and say, hey, I've got this property I own clear with only equity, and I want to get a loan on it right now. And the bank would give him a 3% interest only loan, and he would cash out the investors, give them their money, and pay less interest to the bank. So it's basically an acquisition tool, and he'll refi out if rates make sense, or he'll stay in if he's paying less right now to his investors.
And CPA the cash flow.
And still get the cash flow too. Yeah. So it's kind of genius. And he's also privately refinancing himself out because a lot of these deals he already owned. So he owned them in the first place, and he's going to get Jeremy to cash him out at 4.5%. Now his money is freed up to go buy more deals, which he'll acquire and then go do the same thing again with.
But just mastering the game.
Yeah. Again, just monetary velocity. How quick can you make it move? Cool stuff, right? Do you have any questions, Jeremy?
The only one that popped in my brain is when you're hard lending or private lending to somebody buying fourplexes and stuff, and they default.
You better have first position.
But if they're borrowing the money just for as the down, if you will,
Yeah.
you're not going to be in first position.
Yeah, you're
You'll
not.
barely be in second.
And if you have cash flow, you might get paid. So what Jeremy is saying is so somebody could borrow money for a down payment, and usually banks don't even like this. A lot of times if a bank finds out you borrowed the down payment, they're not going to do business with you. Okay. So if you ultimately you could lie, like there's money in my bank, I don't have to tell them where it came from and they can't really track it, so I can get the loan. So let's say I borrowed 25% from Mike and I went to Jeremy to get a loan, and I'm paying Mike back, which is cool because I have cash flow. All of a sudden I default. Well, Mike's like, cool, I'm secured by the property. No, dude, the bank was first. The bank gets paid first, and if there's anything left after they get paid, then Mike gets taken care of. Okay, so you got to be aware of that. You got to be really look at and make sure you're doing deals with people you trust. Like that's why it all has to be documented. You need to actually see like what's the collateral. If there is a collateral assignment agreement, is there somebody else in first position on the assignment right now? And if there is, I need to have a clear understanding of what's the actual income on the deal. And if there is a default, because no one's going to default, like they just get paid their interest on a default still. So if they default, you're still a debt on the property. They would still have to pay you if there was anything left. So basically, like just think about like there's this big chunk. First group takes it, whatever's left over. Second position takes whatever's left over. Third position can take until it finally runs out, or there's no other positions left. So if you're in the back of the line and the money ran out, there's really not anything there for you. And there's debtors in front of you, so you don't even have the right to foreclose and take the property. So excellent point to bring up, Jeremy. Any other questions? The room got somber after you said that.
Facts, it happens.
Somebody had to say it. Somebody had to say it. All right, guys, we're going to wrap up here. If you're online right now, I want to thank you for joining in. We will pick up part 3 next week. And if you are watching this and anything we said made sense to you, you're interested, maybe you can't figure it out on your own, you'd like more help, I want you to go to sacredaccount.com. Sacredaccount.com. Again, that's sacredaccount.com. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. We'll talk to you guys next week. How'd that live thing work? Pretty good?
Yeah, I'm